Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990's Represent. We're still in our fourth cycle of 1997, talking about a movie. In this episode, we're talking about Boogie Nights by Paul Thomas Anderson. An absolute, just amazing film. One of my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson films. Probably one of my favorite movies of all time as well. I think it actually might be my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson movie. He's done, just classics like There Will Be Blood, like Licorice Pizza. I really liked. For me, the top two are probably this and There Will Be Blood. But this episode, we're talking about Boogie Nights. Got my notes here for it. We're gonna get through those notes. We're gonna get to like the plot and like the soundtrack. Like this movie is basically just perfect, I think. There we go. So Boogie Nights, first released October 10th, 1997 in wide release. I think it premiered at the Toronto Film Festival on September 11th, 1997, so about a month earlier. But wide release October 10th, 1997. Again, written and directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. And I'm just going to grab this really quick. One thing I have for this movie, I didn't watch it on DVD this time. I watched it on streaming on Paramount. But I own the DVD here, and this is kind of, I think, like on the back, this little note from Paul Thomas Anderson says it's kind of the definitive edition, at least of the DVD. I picked this up back in 2001. That was when I first saw it. I had a job where I worked about a block, maybe a couple blocks away from a Sam Goody, and every Saturday on my lunch break, I would go to Sam Goody and just pick up a DVD, because this was kind of shortly after I got my first DVD player. I would just go in, grab a movie. A lot of times it was just sight unseen, just be like, I've heard good things about that movie, and gonna grab it. So I remember picked up Fight Club that way. Boogie Nights, same thing, where I basically just picked it up without having seen the movie before that. Just picked it up and watched it that night. Absolutely loved it. So that's the DVD. And if you're wondering why I don't know it's that way, I'm not using the theatrical cover for the movie. We're actually using the DVD cover for this video, just because the theatrical poster is fine, but I just love the artwork and like the vibrant colors on this cover more than the theatrical poster. So again, that is the DVD cover there. It's a 2-disc thing. This includes a bunch of extras, including like I remember watching it once with Paul Thomas Anderson's commentary, and so on. So. Back to our notes, and it was apparently based on a mockumentary he made, I think in 1998, called the Dirk Diggler story, and that kind of got expanded into what became Boogie Nights. Let me see here. Got nominated for 3 Academy Awards, including Best Screenplay, just an amazing screenplay, and then Best Supporting Actor and Actress for Burt Reynolds and Julianne Moore. Burt Reynolds in this movie is phenomenal. Like, I think like he was coming off of doing movies like Cop and a Half and like Striptease, and I remember there just being a lot of buzz around his particular role in this movie around the time the Academy Awards came out. The awards that happened in 1998. But I think he won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor. Don't know if it was like in drama or comedy, because the Golden Globes usually have like 2 different distinctions about how, like there's like Best Actor in a comedy or Best Actor in a drama. But got nominated, him and Julianne Moore, nominated for both Best Supporting Actor and Actress. I think by this time the other thing I had seen Julianne Moore in was Jurassic World, or the Lost World, the second Jurassic Park film. She was in that. Speaking of just the cast, I'm going to bring the cast up because it's a phenomenal, incredible cast. Actually, just pull up that cast list here really quick. So again, we have Mark Wahlberg as Eddie Adams / Dirk Diggler. He had done some films before this, but this one definitely really kind of catapulted his like film career. Julianne Moore as Maggie and Amber Waves. You have Burt Reynolds as Jack Horner. Don Cheadle, probably the first time I saw him in a film as well, as Buck Swope. John C. Reilly as Reed Rothschild. I think this might be the first time I saw John C. Reilly in a film as well, even though I think I was kind of familiar with him from something else. I'm not sure exactly what it was. William H. Macy as Little Bill. I think at that point, The only thing I remember seeing William H. Macy in was like Mystery Men, like came out in 1999, because I didn't see this until a couple years after. Heather Graham as Brandy slash Roller Girl. You have Nicole Ann Parker as Becky Barnett. You have Philip Seymour Hoffman as Scotty J. Um, I think this may have been. I don't remember if I saw The Big Lebowski before or after this, but yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman's in this. Luis Guzman as Maurice Rodriguez and T.T. Rodriguez. I think that's his like when he's in one of the films. Eventually, he goes by that. Luis Guzman is one of those actors that just makes every film he's in just better by his presence. He's amazing in this. You have Philip Baker Hall as Floyd Gondolini. You have Thomas Jane as Todd Parker. Robert Ridgely as the Colonel. Robert Downey Sr. as Bert. Nina Hartley as Little Bill's wife. Let me see if there's any other major actors in this. Alfred Molina as Rashid Jackson. Alfred Molina, of course. Doc Ock in the Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2, and then the most recent one, I think. As well as Sapito in Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So just an incredible, amazing ensemble cast in this film. Let me see what else we got in our notes. I think some casting things, some people that were originally considered for the roles. So Paul Thomas Anderson originally wanted Leonardo DiCaprio in it, I think based on his role in the Basketball Diaries. But DiCaprio had to pass due to him being signed to in the cast to do Titanic. I think eventually, like years later, DiCaprio said he wished he could have just done both films, and this is for the role that Mark Wahlberg would eventually get. Joaquin Phoenix was also considered for that role, but ended up turning the role down due to the kind of nature of the movie. I don't want to say too much about to be too explicit about the film, just so if people can still actually watch it, doesn't get like taken down or anything. But yeah, Joaquin Phoenix turned it down. Other potential actors that were considered for the role of Jack Horner included Bill Murray. Like, just imagine Bill Murray in this movie. I think that would have been a very interesting thing to see. But Bill Murray was considered, Harvey Keitel, Warren Beatty, Albert Brooks, and I think, let me see, bring up the list here, because I think I just kind of jotted it down a little bit and didn't really. And Sidney Pollack, they also declined to do that particular role. Samuel L. Jackson was considered for the role of Buck at Buck before Don Cheadle signed on for it. Apparently, up for the role of Roller Girl was also Gwyneth Paltrow and Drew Barrymore. Let's see here. Oh, apparently, Burt Reynolds did not particularly get along with Paul Thomas Anderson initially, and I think he even fired his agent after seeing a rough cut of the film. It's interesting because he didn't get along with him, but his performance in this movie is so good that maybe not all the time, not every time you're going to get along with your director, but you still get really good work out of the actor, and the actor, I guess, maybe respects the role enough to do their best. And I think Burt Reynolds in this movie is phenomenal. See, apparently the scene, Thomas Jane did an interview where he said the scene toward the end of the film where they are at Rashid Jackson's house, played by Alfred Molina, and Cosmo is lighting firecrackers and just throwing them. The tension in that scene is almost real, because apparently Thomas Jane said that actor was just instructed by Paul Thomas Anderson just to light the firecrackers and throw them randomly. So the surprised look on Mark Wahlberg, John C. Reilly, and Thomas Jane's face is kind of authentic, because they knew this guy was going to be lighting firecrackers, but they didn't know when he would be throwing them and all that kind of stuff. So they're actually shocked legitimately because this person is just randomly lighting these firecrackers. The soundtrack to the movie is awesome as well. Let me actually just bring up that because I have a list, and it's just there's a bunch of music that's not on the soundtrack. So I think the official soundtrack includes "Feel the Heat" by Paul Thomas Anderson and John C. Reilly, which is just that's the intro to the soundtrack. You have "The Best of My Love" by The Emotions. You have "Jungle Fever" by Chakadas, I think. Let's see, Chakachas, I guess. "Brand New Key" by Melanie Salka. "Spill the Wine" by Eric Burdon and War. You have "Got to Give It Up" by Marvin Gaye. Machine Gun by the Commodores. You have Magnet and Steel by Walter Egan. Ain't No Stopping Us Now by McFadden and Whitehead. You have Sister Christian by Night Ranger. Living Thing by Electric Light Orchestra. God Only Knows by the Beach Boys. And just an incredible use of that song in the film. And then you have The Big Top by Michael Penn and Patrick Warren. They did a volume 2 eventually, which has Mama Told Me Not To by Randy Newman. Fooled Around and Fell in Love by Elvin Bishop, again used iconically years later in Guardians of the Galaxy. You have You Sexy Thing by Hot Chocolate, Boogie Shoes by Casey and the Sunshine Band, Do Your Thing by Charles Wright, and the Watts 103rd and Rhythm Street Band. You have Driver's Seat by Sniffin' the Tears, Feel Too Good by The Move. You have Jesse's Girl by Rick Springfield, JP Walk by The Sound Experience, I Want to Be Free by the Ohio Players, and Joy by the Apollo 100. And then a bunch of other songs that were, in the film but not in the soundtrack. You have Sunny by Boney M, Susan the Sage by Chico Hamilton Quintet, Fly Robin Fly by Silver Convention. What's that? Afternoon Delight by Starland Vocal Band, Lonely Boy by Andrew Gold, Fat Man by Jethro Tull, Flying Objects by Roger Webb, Queen of Hearts by Juice Newton. And I didn't notice that the first time I watched the movie, but I noticed it this time because that song I think shows up in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, and I've kind of known that song ever since playing that game. It's Just a Matter of Time by Brooke Benton. Compared to What by Roberta Flack, 99 Love Balloons by Nina, and then Voices Carried by Till Tuesday. So just an incredible soundtrack, as well as just some of those songs obviously not featured on the soundtrack, probably like due to licensing and what have you. Anyway, now we're going to get into the plot of this film. This is where I'm going to have to be kind of selective about what I actually say. So, film opens up in, I think, 1977 in the San Fernando Valley in California, and it has people going into a nightclub. You have Luis Guzman's character talking to Jack and Amber, and you can definitely tell that he wants to get involved with them in some way. He's like treating them really well. He's like, hey, like, we'll give you the VIP table. And he tells like one of the waiters, like, hey, come over here, do this. You then see Eddie come by, picking up some glasses, cups, brings them to the kitchen, and is basically a dishwasher at this nightclub. And he lives in Torrance, and I think he's all the way. Torrance is fairly south. And the San Fernando Valley is like north of Hollywood, so it's definitely, he says he gets on the bus. And I've ridden buses in LA, and buses, that seems like it will be a somewhat lengthy bus ride. So even Eddie's mom at some point says, well, if you want to work at a nightclub, you should maybe like find one that's closer to home that, isn't so far away. Anyhow, so anyway, Jack goes into the kitchen. He's like talking to Eddie. He's basically trying to get him, trying to recruit him into his production company to make adult films. And Eddie's like, yeah, I'm familiar for work. And then, he goes home. And then you see, like, he is, like, making out, like, he eventually, I think it cuts to a scene where he's, like, making out with his girlfriend at some point. He gets picked up again after leaving the club when it's closed. Jack, Amber, and Roller Girl pick him up. They go to, like, a diner. And he's still trying to recruit him into his company to make these films. He kind of, like, I think he's, like, somewhat interested at first. But then, he gets more interested later because his mom is kind of abusive to him. His dad is kind of just totally checked out. And he comes home very late because, like, he gets off work late, but then they were, hanging out at this diner until all hours of the morning. I think it's, like, probably, like, morning because you can see the sun coming up when he gets home. But his mom kind of freaks out on him, rips a bunch of his posters off the wall, says he'll, like, never amount to anything, that kind of thing. He runs off and runs to Jack's place. And they're having a big kind of party. This is where he gets introduced to Reed, played by John C. Reilly. And the chemistry between John C. Reilly and Mark Wahlberg is just great in this movie. Like, they're talking. He's like, hey man, like you work out? He's like, yeah. He's like, what do you bench press? He's like, what do you lift? What do you do that? And he's like, do you go to this gym? He's like, oh no. He's like, I would have seen you there. He's like, I'm there all the time. And then he makes a margarita. He's like, you ever seen Star Wars? And Mark Wahlberg's character is like, yeah, I've seen it. Like, I don't know how many times he's like, people tell me I look like Han. So just the dialogue in this movie is just classic. And there's like just a big kind of to excess 70s party. Basically, I think this scene it serves as an introduction to most of the characters, and they're all kind of together. So like, one thing I kind of skipped over was Buck works at a um, like a what would you say, a sound system store, like a music store. Not a music store. It's like I was thinking like what would you say? Just like a sound system store, electronic store, whatever you want to call it. And he's like, you can only get this particular like amplifier with this particular modification. We do it right in the store. It's gonna make the bass sound a lot better. And he puts in a country music tape that kind of demonstrated. He's like, can't you just feel the bass? It like cheers up your stomach. It does this. And the guy's like, no, I'm good. He leaves, and his manager chews him out because he's like, you can't be playing like that country and western stuff and expect to sell uh, albums or not albums. I like expect to sell like stereos of that. I can kind of agree with that because it's like you probably want to play like some disco or some rock music on that. But Buck at that point is like really get the country, so he's like play some country music, and like his manager was like, I told you not to try to sell those sound systems with that country and western stuff. Anyway, back to the party. So like all the players are kind of introduced. The Colonel shows up. He's the one that kind of bankrolls all these films. Shows up with like a pretty young looking girlfriend. That character ends up overdosing, and like the Colonel comes in. There's a scene where he's like very calmly collected. He's like, oh man, like all right, well, put her in the limo, drop her at the hospital. Like don't like let them see the limo. Do this, and the guy's freaking out. He's like, man, it's twice in 2 days. That's the one. He's all deed on me, and then he's like, don't you think you better get some better stuff? Then it's like Robert Wrigley is originally is great in this film, and the really cool thing I love about this movie is the first half into like almost maybe halfway through the second act, everything is on the up and up. The up and up. Everything is like they're finding success. They're finding it's kind of like a rise and fall story, and like a rise, fall, and rise story, basically. So first half of the movie essentially is everything is great. Second half of the movie, everything is terrible, and then the very tail end of the third act, everything is kind of starting to get better again. But the funny thing about that is, like, even throughout the first half of the movie, where everything is pretty good for everybody, they Paul Thomas Anderson sprinkles in just a few things that are negative, a few things that like you could definitely tell that something isn't right, and or something is like, especially with like Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, with William H Macy's character, because his wife is constantly cheating on him, so you just see him get constantly like basically just kind of disrespected by her. Um, so and then so this whole party's going on. Somebody calls the party looking for Maggie. Louis Guzman's character answers the phone, Maggie being the real name of Julianne Moore's character, and nobody knows that it's like her kid looking for her, because like part of the whole thing is like her husband has, I think they're divorced, and like there's a custody battle over their kid, and this plays out later in the half of the film where everything is kind of going bad. But she also kind of looks after Mark Wahlberg like a mother. And then later in the film, when Mark Wahlberg is kind of done with Jack and Amber, she kind of then turns her attention to Roller Girl and be like her like surrogate mother. So she definitely has like she wants to be a mother but really can't, because her actual kid is like living with her ex-husband. So she projects it, or I don't know if I'm using the terms correctly, but projects that onto both Eddie and Roller Girl. Anyhow, so they eventually sign Eddie to be a star. And he's like, hey, like, and the Colonel's like, if you, I think it's the Colonel that says like, hey, you got to come up with like a name that you want to use. And then they're like, it's Reed and Eddie are in a hot tub. Jack joins them. And he's like, hey, he's like, I was thinking about my name. I want my name to be Dirk Diggler. And like, shows the name. And he's like, the name is so powerful, it just blows the sign up or whatever. So they get him on board. And then, they go to film their first film. They film it. One other scene I really love, and from all I could gather, this is like tail like attached to the party scene. Is there's a scene where um, Ricky Jay, who plays the kind of the cinematographer of the film, or he's the one that's doing a lot. He's like trying to talk about the photography of the film with Little Bill, played by Willie Macy. And he's like, hey, like we're gonna go get that lens. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. And he's like, do you think that's good? And he's just like, yeah, it's fine. He's like, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit distracted because like his wife is like on the driveway. And William H Macy, from what I've heard, messed up his lines, but he messed up the lines in such a way that it was very plausible that somebody under like a lot like the stress that his character would be under would mess up their thought, that like their train of thought. Like he puts one word in front of the other when it should be the other way around. And apparently Paul Thomas Anderson just liked that mistake so much that he just left it in the film. But they're filming their first film. It does very well. Jack is telling them about his kind of dream is to make one of these films where it actually has a substantial story to it. And eventually, both Reed and Eddie, or Dirk Diggler, come up with this kind of spy character, or characters, because they come up with, I think it was Brock Landers and Chet Rockwell. And especially, it's like they kind of want it to be like a James Bond kind of character where he's like suave and sophisticated and he's doing all this stuff. So they do a whole series of these. I just remember, I just said the name of it, I can't forget that. These Brock Landers films. So they do those films. And this is toward the late 70s. Going into the 1980s. And there's like a hard cutoff where once it becomes 1980, it just becomes bad for basically everybody involved. So I think Philip Baker Hall, let me bring up the cast again. Because he is kind of, yeah, Philip Baker Hall, his character is wanting to get into the industry as well, but doesn't think there's really a future in like theaters for these kind of films or shooting these movies on films, and he wants to switch to videotape. So he's trying to convince the Colonel to do it, to switch to videotape. He's trying to convince Jack, played by Burt Reynolds, to switch to videotape, and everybody is very resistant to going to videotape. Like they kind of they look down on it, so to speak. That you can say that about like basically like just filmmaking in general. Like a lot of people, like I remember Christopher Nolan just like really always loved shooting on film, as opposed to doing it like, well, I don't know if he would ever do it on tape, but like stuff like that. So they're all kind of resistant to this kind of change. This one Phil Baker Hall character is the only one that really at this point is seeming interested in on it. There is a big New Year's Eve party, so like it's New Year's Eve 1979, and going into 1980. Philip Seymour Hoffman's character kisses Mark Wahlberg, and Mark Wahlberg's like, "Hey man, like what are you doing?" Like, and then his character starts sitting in his car. He's like, "Man, I'm a big idiot. I'm a big idiot." Little Bill shows up at the party, and his wife is then again cheating on him. He actually walks out to the car, grabs a gun, shoots both of them, and then shoots himself. And that's kind of the cutoff to when 1980 starts. In this part, I think we're introduced to Thomas Jane's character like shortly after this or right before. And apparently, I think he's like his character is like a dancer at like a strip club or something. And him and Dirk and Reed start getting really into like just like becoming like addicted to drugs constantly. The Colonel gets arrested, and it's speculated that like it's the same situation that happened earlier in the film where he was trying to like he's like, this lady overdosed on me, but he's in jail, and then Burt Reynolds is like, okay, so what's the problem? And he's like, well, they found some inappropriate material there. I'm not really going to go into what those are, but it's speculated that he definitely had that material on him, but perhaps the Philip Baker Hall character like knew about it and used it to get him into trouble. So then it basically cuts off Burt Reynolds' funding from because the Colonel is the one that basically funded all the filmmaking that they were doing. So it basically got him to have to switch to videotape. So you see them eventually start filming on videotape. Julianne Moore's character goes to a legal like court battle, kind of like they're like in like an office, and they're like, well, and her ex-husband's like, well, I don't think like having our kid around like the environment that you work in is appropriate. And the next thing you just see her standing outside the courtroom or the legal office or whatever it was, just kind of crying and sobbing because like it's obvious that she didn't get custody or potentially even any kind of like joint custody over her kid. So things go bad for her. Things are going bad for Dirk because he's kind of completely strung out at this point. Reed a little bit less strung out, but still like not great. Like I think there's a scene where he goes up to Jack. He's like, "Hey, I'm ready to shoot. I'm ready to shoot." And Jack's like, "We'll do it in 20 minutes. We'll do it in 20 minutes." He's like, "Nah, man." He's like, "I'm ready to shoot now." And then he's like, "You need to go. You need to cool off." And then he basically storms off and is kind of now done with working with Jack. They replace Eddie with, I forget the character's name. It's basically another person standing in for Brock Landers, and you can definitely tell the quality of the Brock Landers films since they switched actors has definitely like went downhill. Buck wants to open his own stereo store. That's what I was looking at, like sound equipment. What am I talking about? So wants to open his own stereo store. Tries to get a loan to make declines his loan based on the profession that he's in. So he can't get his loan. And then eventually there's a scene where both Roller Girl and Eddie are going through some rough stuff right there. Because like they're trying to film something where basically they're in a limo, Jack and Roller Girl, and they're going down, I think, Sherman Way, which I've been on, trying to pick up somebody to basically bring it to the limo and film something with them. And it does not go well because the guy recognizes Roller Girl from school and basically tells Jack that his film sucked now anyway. Jack just beats the guy up, and then Roller Girl like stomps the guy with her roller skate, and the guy's just left kind of. He's alive, but he's definitely messed up. During the same time, it's intercut, so this whole sequence is very very suspenseful kind of. You see Eddie get picked up by this guy. They're in a truck. And he's doing something. The guy then just beats him up. A bunch of his friends come by and beat him up even more. Kind of wild. And this is intercut with the whole thing with Jack and Roller Girl. And then kind of close to the final sequence of the film, one of the best sequences, they have a plan to rob Rashid Jackson, played by Alfred Molina, of a bunch of money. So they basically take a bunch of baking soda, say, hey, it's this is drugs. We're gonna bring it to him. We're gonna get $5,000 from him. They go to his house. They go in there. The guy's bodyguard has a gun. He's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'll take the stuff. The guy gives him $5,000, and he's like, the guy's lighting a firecrackers, throwing him off, like I mentioned earlier in the video. And he's playing like a mixtape. He's like, hey man, I just hate when you buy an album and they tell you to listen to it in a certain order. I don't like doing that. I like making my own mixtapes. And I think he messes up he's like, is this volume? Because like it says when it stops the tape and it goes to like do the auto reverse. I think it was like it said volume 6, and I thought he said it was like volume 11. I could be wrong, but he probably just like the character probably just mistook like which volume it was on. But like he's playing like Night Ranger by Sister Christian, and then it goes into Jesse's Girl by Rick Springfield. And they're getting ready to leave. They're like, hey man, like that bodyguard's got a gun. Like let's get out of here. And then Todd's like, no, we're not going anywhere. He's like, we want what's in the floor safe in your master bedroom. And the guy, and Alfred Molina's character is like, what? He's like, and then Todd's like, we ain't going anywhere, man. We want what's in the floor, in the master bedroom, in the floor safe, man. And then he's like, and Todd pulls a gun out, and then basically like he shoots the bodyguard. I think Todd gets hit in the arm by the bodyguard, and then Alfred Molina's character runs into the bedroom. And Reed and Dirk are like, hey man, let's just get out of here, let's go. And I think like Todd walks up to the door, opens the door. I think he kicks the door open. And Alfred Molina's character has a shotgun. He just shoots Todd with a shotgun. And then Reed and Dirk escape, like barely. You see, and then Alfred Molina's like, come on, you puppies. And he's like blasting at him with the shotgun. They get away eventually. And then Eddie / Dirk's car runs out of gas. You see Reed just kind of run off, so you don't actually see him until the next like couple scenes. So after that, everything's kind of gone bad, and then you see he shows back up at Jack's house. They reconcile, and then you see kind of a montage of To God Only Knows. This is where was really bad and things are starting to get better. Like Roller Girl has. Oh, I totally skipped over the scene where. So there's a scene where Buck and his girlfriend slash wife, they're pregnant and gonna have a kid. They go into a Buck goes into a donut shop. I don't know why I glazed over this. Did it? No pun not intended about donuts, but goes into a donut shop to get some donuts, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll take like this, and this." And there's a little hurt customer at the donut shop just sitting at like a booth, and then you see a guy come in. He's like tries to rob the donut shop. He's like, "Man, give me all the money in the safe. Give me all the money in the drawer." And then the customer pulls a gun out. So then basically, there's four people in this coffee shop, donut shop at this point. It's Buck, it's the clerk, it's the guy robbing the donut shop, and then the other customer. So what happens is I don't remember exactly who shoots who, but I think the customer shoots the robber. The robber then shoots the customer. The customer falls over and then shoots another shot, which hits the clerk. So basically, everybody gets shot except for Buck. And there's a huge bag of money on the ground. He grabs the bag, and then what are you gonna do in this situation, right? It's probably like you need money for your store. You need money for your like your pregnant wife, or girlfriend, or whatever. I don't know if they were married or not, but grabs the money, and then in the montage where everything is better again, you see Roller Girl is now going back to school to get a GED. You have Buck open up his stereo store. You have Luis Guzman's character opens up a nightclub, and I think they actually spell Rodriguez. So he's like, no, that's a Q, not a G. What the hell? So and then Dirk is now back working with Jack, and Reed is performing doing like magic, because they had a few scenes where he was doing magic tricks throughout the movie or earlier in the movie, and then they shows him doing magic. I think he's like a strip club, but like he's doing magic tricks, and then end of the film is Mark Wahlberg or Eddie slash Dirk Diggler sitting in like the chair. I think it's like 1984 at this point, so it takes place over like 7 years, I guess. But he's sitting in a chair, running over some of his lines, and then he stands up. He's like, "You're a big shining star." I'm not going to say what the next part of the scene is, but then he walks out, basically back in business with Jack, and that is where the film ends. Just what an incredible film! Like I said, probably my favorite Paul Thomas Anderson film. I haven't seen all of them. I haven't seen Inherent Vice yet. I haven't seen Heart 8, which I think is his first. I haven't seen Magnolia, Heart 8, Inherent Vice, or Phantom Thread. But I really liked There Will Be Blood is amazing. Boogie Nights is incredible. I've seen Punch Drunk Love, which is really good. And that's kind of like a very more serious Adam Sandler film. And not to get too much into Punch Drunk Love, but I remember at a local cinema at the time, there was a local independent cinema that was going to show Punch Drunk Love, and the guy who owned the theater came up to the front of the theater, was like, "Some upcoming movies, we have Punch Drunk Love, which stars Adam Sandler." And I think the audience was like kind of starting to groan and be like, "Oh, come on, like an Adam Sandler movie." And he was just like, he's like, "No, I've seen this one, and this one's actually like a much more serious film." So I've seen that Paul Thomas Anderson film. Definitely need to go back and rewatch some of his other stuff. But Boogie Nights is phenomenal. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. It's on Paramount. I watched it on Paramount, but I have it on DVD as well. Absolutely love this film. It's like the most recent movie I saw that was similar to this movie, I think, was Babylon. It followed a lot of the same beats as Babylon, but I feel this is the superior version of the story. Like, I don't think the story is unique or even exclusive to Boogie Nights. I think there's other films that have done this kind of rise and fall story, and then at the end you have kind of a redemption a little bit, or not a redemption necessarily, but there's other movies that have done this, but I think this is one of my favorite versions of that story. But that's going to do it for this episode. So remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again in a few days. We'll be doing our either computer or video game from 1997 before jumping back into 1998, and then 1999 is starting all over again. But thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.